Generally speaking, extreme environmental changes like those in the East African Rift Valley would lead to the extinction of most species living in the treetops. However, humans survived this hellish trial. Undeniably, the majority of apes that lost their forests perished. But life is resilient, and a few mutated individuals survived, sparking the flame of evolution. In the last 2 episodes, we discussed how the environmental changes in Africa led to bipedalism, and how bipedalism and a more complex environment forced the brain to enlarge to process the explosion of information. These 2 unique skills gradually made humans strong like never before in the natural environment. However, it must be clarified that this environment was only relatively extreme, not for all creatures, but only for the ancestors of humans in the humid forests. At the same time, this harsh environment was not the kind of disaster that instantly killed a large number of organisms, so it allowed room for natural evolution. Not all harsh environments can create strong life forms, but only those that apply the right level of pressure to the right species. The various mass extinctions in Earth's history have been biological disasters, not conducive to the creation of intelligent life. So, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. The environmental changes in East Africa were a stroke of luck for human evolution, a fortune built upon the misfortunes of early humans. However, every coin has 2 sides. Bipedalism and the increase in brain size were temporary measures at the time, with compatibility issues with the original body structure. The seemingly revolutionary adaptations came with fatal hidden dangers. For the species, this danger was the extreme difficulty of childbirth. This is evident. Bipedalism and strong thighs compressed the female birth canal, and separating the thighs would cause a loss of balance and stability. Meanwhile, a large head was a disaster for childbirth, not to mention prehistoric times. Even in the early 20th century, the mortality rate of newborns was as high as 30%, and the maternal mortality rate was about 1.5%. If a species faces fatal problems in its way of reproducing, it creates immense evolutionary pressure. Yet, humans took on this deadly risk, continued to walk upright, and used their energy-consuming brains, showing just how harsh the environmental pressure was at that time. It was a choice of the lesser of 2 evils. One could speculate that without this reproductive dilemma, humans would have become carefree wanderers of the world, hunting in small groups, living a life full of oddities and challenges. But this state would have persisted to this day. However, looking back at this issue, we see that this dilemma actually forced human society to make greater changes or laid the foundation for the formation of human society. Humans began to form large-scale networks of mutual cooperation and move towards civilization. When the reproductive dilemma arose, bipedalism and the increased brain size could not be abandoned. Therefore, there are 3 evolutionary strategies to address this. First, the birth canal evolved to have stronger contraction capabilities to forcibly expel the fetus. Second, the fetus skull became softer. And third, the fetus head does not grow too large before birth, with most growth occurring after birth. Humans have adopted all 3 strategies. Firstly, the birth canal contracts violently, causing the fetus to perform complex rotational movements inside the canal. The rapid demand for bipedalism means the birth canal is still curved, making collisions inevitable, which is the source of extreme pain during childbirth. Excessive compression can cause tearing of the birth canal, leading to postpartum hemorrhage and threatening the mother's life. Next, let's talk about the second strategy. The fetus skull is actually malleable. A newborn's head often appears elongated and pointed due to the compression in the birth canal. This is because the skull bones have not fully fused, allowing for some degree of deformation. After birth, the bones gradually fuse, forming a complete skull. The third strategy involves delivering the fetus before the head grows too large, with most growth occurring after birth. After birth, the child immediately requires a certain level of brain function, such as the nervous system to regulate, and the digestive and respiratory systems to respond sensitively to the environment. Simply put, any discomfort will cause loud crying. Therefore, the gestation period has been adjusted to about 10 months. Compared to the physical development of other animals at birth, this time is roughly half of the original development time. So, in some sense, we are all premature babies, and the remaining development tasks are carried out after birth, with the postnatal development process slowed down significantly. This is why most animals start walking and playing within hours of birth, even eating grass or meat directly. In contrast, human babies need more than a year to stand up, and the underdeveloped digestive system delays the time they can eat solid food significantly. Human fetuses are born just at the point where they can start feeding, otherwise, they wouldn't be able to come out. This leads to a problem. Prematurely born infants are particularly weak and have poor survival abilities, requiring meticulous parental care to survive, including obtaining many immune capabilities from breast milk. For human females, the extreme pain of childbirth is just the beginning of the ordeal, as the interruption of child-rearing quickly follows. In fact, a significant portion of fetal development in the womb is concentrated on the development of heart and lung functions. This ensures that the child can cry like a flood alarm immediately after birth, and when the alarm sounds, the parents rush over. The decibel level of this noise is enough to prevent the family from doing anything else. The saying "a crying baby gets fed" is a result of evolution to adapt to premature birth. At the same time, to ensure that mothers take meticulous care of their children, maternal instincts have gradually strengthened through evolution. The deepened bond between mother and child leads to a subjective consciousness of caring for the child. Although maternal love is common in the natural world, this maternal bond is cut off once the offspring can survive independently at 2 or 3 years old. In humans, however, this bond lasts a lifetime. Here, we need to introduce a way of thinking about evolutionary phenomena, using an individual's gene return rate to infer the reason for specific evolutionary phenomena. In this context, the unit of evolution is not the species but the individual. Gene return rate refers to the number of times an individual's genes continue to replicate. Increasing the likelihood of an offspring surviving to sexual maturity and producing numerous offspring both contribute to the growth of the gene return rate. The former ensures quality, while the latter ensures quantity. Mutations that drive the growth of the gene return rate will be preserved by natural selection. For example, the instinct for self-preservation. The earliest forms of life may not have had a will to live, but those without a survival instinct would die more easily, reducing their chances of gene replication. Therefore, those with a strong survival instinct were the ones who remained. This explanation can be more straightforward. In the primordial soup of Earth over 3 billion years ago, long-chain molecules formed through prolonged chemical reactions. Some could replicate themselves, while others could not. Ultimately, the molecules that filled the environment were those capable of self-replication, such as DNA or RNA. This is often asked, why does DNA replicate itself? Because only nucleotides that could replicate through the hydrogen bond base-bearing principle have survived to this day. The survival instinct and self-replication ability mentioned earlier are traits that can increase the gene return rate, thus explaining their existence. This concept is crucial for the human evolutionary story that I will discuss later. In primitive times, a mother could be certain that the child she bore carried her genes, so she would carefully raise the child to sexual maturity without any hesitation. Additionally, since a woman's body requires a period of recovery after giving birth, she cannot adopt a strategy of producing numerous offspring to increase the gene return rate. Therefore, the unconditional nurturing of her child, what we call maternal love, becomes evident. However, it was different for males. Even if a man had intercourse with a woman, he couldn't be sure that the child she bore was his. Furthermore, reproduction was relatively easy for males, akin to low-intensity exercise. The reason intercourse involves a piston-like motion is to remove the sperm of other males. Imagine this with actual physical structures. Therefore, from the perspective of gene return rate, a man's strategy to increase his gene frequency would be to continually find ways to mate with different females, ultimately achieving higher chances of gene replication through sheer quantity. This phenomenon is common in the animal kingdom. Most animals are raised solely by their mothers, with the so-called father long gone. A male lion will protect the cubs, but only after monopolizing mating rights and eliminating the possibility of the lionesses mating with other males. When an outsider male lion defeats the current ruler, its first act is to kill all the previous ruler's offspring. Then, during the breeding season, it quickly mates with all the lionesses in the pride. Once the lionesses are bearing its offspring, it will protect the pride to increase its gene return rate, but it does not participate in rearing the young. In fact, the male lion needs the lionesses to feed it, and once it becomes the pride leader, it no longer hunts. These evolutionary logics are determined by the gene return rate, which means all males are inherently bad boys by nature, as dictated by their genes. But in the natural world, for most animals, it doesn't matter if the male is a bad boy because the females can raise the offspring by themselves. However, for humans, this is entirely different. Due to the painful childbirth process and the difficulty of raising a child born prematurely, if all the burden is placed on the female, she can't bear it. When all the energy is invested in caring for the child, there is no time or strength left to obtain food. Whether it's hunting or running far to pick fruit, carrying a few screaming kids, and possibly being pregnant with another, the woman would collapse. But even in this situation, the cost of infidelity from the evolutionary perspective is unbearable. For males, more mating still aligns with the needs of the gene return rate. As mentioned earlier, the concept of the gene return rate targets the individual, not the species. So, studying evolution should focus on the individual rather than the group. In this way, women need to find ways to keep men by their side to obtain food and help care for the children, increasing the woman's own gene return rate. This creates evolutionary pressure specific to females. Therefore, to keep the man, the woman's physiological structure also began to change. You might have watched Animal World as a kid. When spring comes, animals enter their mating season, and the grasslands become restless. However, in human society, we never seem to hear this term. The reason is that humans do not have a mating season, or rather, humans are always in mating season. Other animals lose interest in the opposite sex after the mating season. So, from other animals' perspective, humans are always looking for mating opportunities at any time and place, driven by their sexual desire. Meanwhile, other animals focus on obtaining food after their mating season ends. Indeed, all animals have limited ovulation periods. Mating outside of this period is futile, providing no gene return rate. Simultaneously, continuous mating would lead to distraction and reduced vigilance, making them easy prey for predators. Even for top predators in the food chain, expending a large amount of valuable energy on such futile efforts would be counterproductive. Therefore, the time spent on this activity should logically be as short as possible, which is indeed the case in the animal kingdom. However, because mating brings pleasure and provides positive feedback in consciousness, both females and males enjoy the mating process during their mating season. Males must compete for mating rights before females enter their ovulation period. And since not all females' ovulation periods are synchronized, males' mating seasons are generally longer than females. At this time, if the females among human ancestors wanted males to serve them for a longer time, aligning the females' extended mating season with the males would undoubtedly become a way to keep the males around. For males, due to the reasons mentioned earlier, their mating season is still longer than that of females. Correspondingly, this extended mating season led to a chase between males and females, gradually filling the gaps completely. Humans became the only mammal species with a continuous mating season. This is a consequence of our bipedalism and enlarged brains. The energy waste and associated risks from continuous mating still couldn't overcome the pressure from the reproductive dilemma. At the same time, our powerful brains have the ability to analyze and can actively control sexual behavior, leaving time and energy for hunting and gathering. However, the sexual desire driven by the brain still led women to use continuous mating to keep men around to some extent. Staying with one woman also enhanced a man's recognition of his own children. Once men could largely be sure that the children were theirs, the gene for paternal love had a reason to appear. Men would strive to provide food and living space for their offspring. In prehistoric times, paternal love did not yield much genetic return, so it wasn't selected for by the natural environment. Thus, the gene for a good man never had a chance to proliferate. However, continuous mating only became effective when a man needed to put in some effort to find another mate. If a man had many females around him who were also continuously in estrus, then fidelity wouldn't yield a higher return rate than promiscuity. At this point, females evolved another secret weapon: concealed ovulation. In the natural world, most animals' mating seasons coincide with the female's ovulation period because only then does mating make sense. Thus, most female animals exhibit some physical changes during ovulation to attract males. However, humans are different. During ovulation, a woman's body shows no outward signs, so men cannot know when it is happening. Therefore, for men, the best strategy to deal with this is to stay with one woman and mate as often as possible to ensure that any offspring are likely to be theirs. In a social living environment, if a man couldn't control himself and went out to seek other mates, he couldn't guarantee that his woman wouldn't be unfaithful during his absence. If she were ovulating at that time, he might end up raising another man's child. Thus, the best strategy was to stay with one woman and mate frequently, ensuring that any offspring were likely to be his and thus cared for by both parents. Those males who were too promiscuous and irresponsible had higher child mortality rates, and their genes were gradually eliminated. It is important to note that this is not a conscious strategic game between men and women but is driven by gene return rates, which dictate natural selection. This selection favored genetic mutations that made it easier to leave behind offspring. These mutations often manifest as subconscious behaviors, such as jealousy. Men and women stay loyal to each other due to jealousy. Concealed ovulation also reduced conflicts among males and human groups. If males competed for mating rights in a specific time frame, it would lead to disastrous outcomes, with a significant reduction in the number of able-bodied males. Concealed ovulation reduced the intensity of this competition. However, this can be seen as an unintended benefit because the unit of evolution is the individual, not the species. In summary, the difficulties in raising offspring due to the reproductive dilemma led women to evolve concealed ovulation and continuous estrus to keep men around to care for themselves and jointly raise their offspring. Men, in turn, could establish clear paternity. Based on this, men evolved a predisposition for paternal care and willingly raised their offspring. This increased the survival rate of the offspring and directly increased the gene return rate. Mainstream human society gradually moved towards monogamy, laying the foundation for the concept of love. Of course, this is not absolute, just the mainstream. This also leads to other unique human phenomena. For instance, in the natural world, males are usually more colorful and attractive than females. In humans, however, it is more natural for females to be more concerned with their appearance. This is because, in human society, not only do females choose males as mates, but males, who must also take responsibility for their children, choose females as well. Women, after mating, need to use their attractiveness to keep men who are better at acquiring resources. This has led to women becoming more beautiful and skilled in adorning themselves, showcasing their full femininity, which is beneficial for childbearing. Meanwhile, men have become stronger, more inclined towards hunting, or more logical and rational to address scarcity issues. Although humanistic ideals now lead women to tell themselves that beauty is a reflection of a refined lifestyle and a source of self-confidence, not to please men, it must be clarified that this is subjective awareness. The instinct to love beauty evolved biologically to attract men for joint child rearing, determined by gene return rates. Another important point is that the reproductive dilemma greatly contributed to human longevity. In the animal kingdom, most creatures die after losing reproductive ability because the disappearance of the old individuals saves survival resources and benefits the offspring. Therefore, dying soon after completing reproductive tasks can increase the gene return rate. In humans, however, women lose reproductive ability around 48 years old, after menopause, when their children have entered reproductive age. Due to the difficulty of raising children caused by premature birth, grandparents help their daughters raise their grandchildren, which also increases the gene return rate. Even though there are ways to keep men around, the genes for monogamy are not fixed in men as they are in penguins. The primal bad boy genes haven't been completely eradicated, and widespread mating's gene return rate hasn't been fully eliminated. In specific environments, these genes still play a role. Therefore, having their mothers help raise their children is more reliable. Grandparents taking care of grandchildren also competes with grandchildren for survival resources. Obviously, the gene return from cooperative child rearing offset the competition for food because, in extremely scarce or dangerous situations, parents and grandparents would prioritize the survival of their offspring, even at the cost of their own lives. This means survival resources and opportunities were preferentially given to children. The reproductive dilemma caused premature birth, which first created maternal love. Subsequently, women, to get men to help them and jointly raise offspring, resorted to behaviors that created love, clarifying paternal relationships. Love further drove the formation of paternal care. Similarly, to have more hands to raise offspring, the elderly appeared in human society, leading to the formation of family bonds. The intelligent human brain made emotional exchanges among family members and social interactions with other families possible. Family bonds fostered sympathy, compassion, and empathy, gradually summarized as love. This was the foundation for humans moving towards civilization, allowing humans to stand out among most animals. Otherwise, humans might have remained top predators on the grasslands, using sharp sticks to hunt, but staying relatively barbaric. Evolving to the level of forming families made humans true strong beings, leading to the conquest of the globe. That's it for this episode. If you liked our content, please subscribe to our channel for more exciting content.